Chapter 2. Hell was waiting on the man. From the song. The night burned cold. Hell was waiting on the man. I need to tell you about the man we were waiting for, because we just didn't wake up one day hoping someone would show up. We knew he was coming. We'd always known. The promise was older than any of us. It started in the garden. I wasn't there for that. None of us were except Adam, and he didn't talk about it much. You'd think a man who walked with God in the cool of the day would have a lot to say, but Adam carried a weight that made him quiet. He knew what he'd lost. He knew what it cost. And he knew what God said to the serpent on the way out the door. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed, and he shall crush your head, and you shall bruise his heel. That was the first promise before the law, before the covenants, before the priests, the prophets, and the sacrifices, before any of it. God looked at the thing that had just wrecked everything and told it to its face that it was already finished. Not right now, not today, but a day was coming when someone born of a woman would put his heel on that serpent's skull, and that would be the end of it. The serpent would get a shot in, a bruise, but the serpent would get crushed. That was the promise we carried, every single one of us on this side of the divide. That's what we were holding on to. Different generations heard it in different ways, but it was always the same promise wearing different clothes. Abraham heard it like this: in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. That's what God told him, not some of the nations, all of them. And not through an army or a kingdom or a program, through a seed. One descendant, one person coming down the line would carry the blessing that would undo what the serpent had done. Abraham believed it. He didn't understand all of it. I can tell you that from talking to him. He'd be the first to say he spent most of his life with more questions than answers. But he believed the voice that told him to walk, and he walked. And then God asked him to put Isaac on the altar, the son he'd waited 25 years for. Abraham picked up the knife because he believed that even if God let the boy die, God could raise him back up. That's what faith looks like when it's not sitting in a comfortable chair. That's faith with a knife in its hands and tears running down its face, still saying, I trust you. He told me once, and I never forgot the way he said it. I didn't understand the ram in the thicket until I got here. Now I see it. The ram was never the point. The ram was a picture. God was showing me what he was going to do with his own son. When Abraham said that, the whole place got quiet. Moses heard the promise differently. He didn't get a word about a seed. He got a system. God gave him the law, rules, sacrifices, priests, a tabernacle, a whole way of life built around one idea. You are separated from God by sin, and blood is required to bridge the gap. Every year on the Day of Atonement, the high priest would go into the most holy place with the blood of a goat and sprinkle it on the mercy seat. Sins covered, slate wiped, nation restored, for now. But Moses knew. He told me he always knew the system was temporary. It had to be, because it never stopped. If the sacrifices actually fixed the problem, you'd only need one. But the priest went back in every single year. Same ritual, same blood, same covering that covered but never cleansed. Moses said it was like painting over rust. It looks fine for a while, but the rust is still underneath and it's still eating through. Moses didn't get the whole picture during his lifetime, but God told him something that stuck. The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your midst, from your brethren. Him you shall hear. A prophet like Moses, someone with that kind of authority, that kind of access to God, that kind of power, but greater. Because this one wouldn't just deliver a nation from slavery. This one would deliver all of them, every nation, every generation, from something deeper than Egypt. David heard it as a throne. God promised him that his kingdom would last forever. Not his personal reign. David knew he was going to die like everyone else, but his line, his lineage. Someone from David's house would sit on a throne that would never end. David wrote songs about it, psalms that described things David himself had never seen. A righteous king, a suffering servant, a man abandoned by God and pierced through, who somehow comes out on the other side in victory. David told me he didn't fully understand what he was writing when he wrote Psalm 22. My God, why have you forsaken me? He said the words came through him, not from him, like he was holding a pen for someone else. A song about a future he couldn't see, written in a language of suffering he hadn't experienced. Not like that. Not to that depth. I wrote about his death before he was born, David said to me once. Then he got quiet, looked across the divide at nothing in particular, and said, I just didn't know it was him. That was the thing about all of us. We all had pieces. Abraham had the seed, Moses had the system, David had the throne, Isaiah had the suffering servant, Daniel had the Son of Man. He said, one like the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven, given authority and glory in a kingdom that would never be destroyed. Jeremiah had the new covenant, God himself promising that the day was coming when he would make a new arrangement, not like the one he had made with Moses, one where the law wasn't written on stone, but on hearts. Every one of us had a piece of the picture, but none of us had the whole thing. It's like being handed one piece of a puzzle and being told, this is real. This is true. Hold on to it. So you hold on to it with your whole life. You turn it over in your hands. You study the shape, the colors, the edges. You believe with everything in you that it fits into something bigger. But you never get to see the box. You never get to see what the finished puzzle looks like. That's what it was like on this side of the divide. A room full of people holding their pieces, knowing they all fit together, waiting for the moment when someone would walk in and show us the picture. And here's the part I didn't think about most. It wasn't just us who were waiting. The other side was waiting too, though not in the same way. The darkness over there knew something was coming. I don't mean the people in torment, I mean the darkness itself. The powers, the rulers of that realm, whatever you want to call them, the forces that had been running the economy of death since Adam walked out of the garden. They knew the promise too. Think about that. The serpent was in the garden when God made the promise. He heard it with his own ears. He shall crush your head. The serpent knew from that day one that something was coming for him. Every generation that passed, every prophet that spoke, every sacrifice that bled on an altar, all of it was a reminder that the clock was ticking, that the seed of the woman was on his way, that one day the man would arrive. So the darkness did what darkness does. It fought the promise. Every chance it got, it tried to corrupt the bloodline. It tried to destroy the nation. It tried to kill the babies. Pharaoh drowning the Hebrew boys, and the centuries later, Herod slaughtering the innocents. Every time God moved a piece forward, the darkness tried to knock it off the board. But you can't outmaneuver the one who invented the board. And now, in this place where time didn't move, and the stillness had reigned for as long as any of us could remember, the ground was shaking, and the darkness was afraid. Not nervous, afraid. I had heard plenty of sounds from the other side of the divide: anguish, rage, regret, the constant grinding noise of separation from God. But I had never heard fear. Not from the darkness. The darkness had always been confident over there, cruel and confident, like a warden who knows the prisoners can't escape. But something had changed. The tremors were getting stronger. The pressure was building. Whatever was happening above us in the world of the living, it was reaching its climax. I didn't know it then, but I know it now. At that very moment, on a hill outside of Jerusalem, a man was hanging on a cross. The Son of God in human flesh, carrying every sin of every person who ever lived and would ever live, absorbing the full weight of the judgment that was never meant for him. The sky had gone dark. The earth was cracking. And the man on the cross was about to say 3 words that would end one world and begin another. It is finished. Not I am finished, not it's over. It is finished. The work, the mission, the promise, the thing that every sacrifice pointed to, every prophet spoke about, every patriarch carried in their chests like burning coal. It was done, completed, accomplished, the final payment, paid in full by the only one who could pay it. And somewhere between that last breath on the cross and what happened next, the divide between the living and the dead was crossed by the only person who had the authority to cross it. Not an angel, not a prophet, not another priest with blood of another animal. The man. The night burned cold. And hell, every power, every principality, every ruler of darkness that had been running the show since the garden was about to meet the one whose heel they'd been running from for 4,000 years. They weren't ready. Closing, chapter 2.